Now, I don't mean to milk much more videos out of the demo that we got to see at E3 this year for the Division 2. I've actually decided to not really do breakdowns of some of the things that they've shown so far, such as which gear brands we have so far and what stats they give us, because so much of that is still subject to change. But there is something that I've said in almost every single video that I've made on the Division 2 so far, and that is that I can see that the developers have really listened to the feedback that the player base has given them and have made big changes to the game accordingly. It still very much makes it seem like it is the next Division game. It still feels like the Division, but it just has tons and tons of improvements slapped on top of it. It really seems like that the developers are finally going to be able to fix almost everything that was wrong with The Division 1 and give us the experience that we've always wanted. What I never really talked extensively about though is what those changes are. Sure, some of them, they're obvious, like the armor change for example. We now have an armor bar above our health bar, or the removal of signature skills. Those are, you know, very obvious examples, but there are also some things that are far more difficult to spot. For example, we have the changes to grenades, or the changes to the weapon talents. And especially to someone who hasn't really paid attention to the trailers or hasn't really played the Division extensively, it might seem like, you know, that the Division 1 and the Division 2, they're not that different. But if you look at all these changes and think about how they're going to affect the gameplay, you'll see that those two games actually differ quite a lot. So today, that's what I wanted to highlight. I wanted to talk about some of the changes that I've seen so far and how I think they're going to affect the game overall. So yeah, first up, I do want to talk about the most obvious one, the armor bar change. And when I talk about the armor bar change, I'm talking about this white armor bar that you have above your health bar that will have to be depleted first before players can start shooting your health, or NPCs can start shooting your health. As some of you may know, this is something that I'm very happy to see in the Division 2. I suggested something along these lines, actually, as a feature for the Division 1 back in patch 1.3, because back in patch 1.3, the damage resilience that you got from armor was kind of broken and the scaling was all off, and although an armor bar instead wasn't really a possibility for the Division 1 at the time, it is still cool to see that the developers took this idea and implemented it for the Division 2. Now the benefits of having a set armor bar over just raw damage mitigation is that, well, for one, it of course makes the PvE and the PvP more consistent with each other. Both NPCs and players will now have a health bar and then also an armor bar on top of that, which allows stats like enemy armor damage and extra health damage to be consistent with each other. If you get enemy armor damage, it is going to have the exact same effect on either a player or an NPC. And that makes the game a whole lot easier to understand. Instead of using this formula to calculate damage gain in PvP from enemy armor damage, because that's gonna get confusing, let me just tell you that. But another positive benefit of this change is that players will potentially have more freedom to stack either armor or plus health rolls on their builds without it necessarily being too strong, because now it's just gonna add a flat value of either health or armor on top of your build, maybe 500, maybe 1000, maybe even 10,000 once we get to the gear sets. But that's still better than amplifying your whole health pool with a percentage-based mitigation amount, as we had in the Division 1, because that could get pretty out of control, especially once we reach the 60 or 70% values. We all remember patch 1.3. Now, another big thing that I mentioned earlier in some of my other videos already is the removal of signature skills. That's the second thing on this list. We don't have the survivor link anymore, we don't have the recovery link anymore, we do not have a tactical link. All of those have been completely taken out of the game, and as a so-called ultimate or super ability, we now simply have a signature weapon that is tied to a specialization. Now, I'm just gonna assume that you all know what specializations are, because I've already talked about this a lot during the E3 videos that I released. If you don't know, just check those back. And I also don't want to talk too much about the signature weapons, because that's also a topic that we've already been through a lot. But what I will say though is that this is a change that will hopefully reward more player skill instead of just having a free win button. The signature weapons, they're going to be powerful, alright? They're going to be very, very strong, but it isn't like in the Division 1 where you activate the button and you basically cannot die for 10 seconds, or you can revive somebody that's 45 meters away from you. If you grab your signature weapon, you will still go through the animation of grabbing it, which is about a second that you can't really do anything. And then you still have to land your shots. You still have to make your bullets count. And if you don't hit somebody with your bullet, then your entire signature weapon was basically useless that fight. And if somebody else is shooting you while you're getting your signature weapon out, it's not like you're invincible. You're still going to take full damage. You're going to go down just as fast. And it's basically just you have a weapon that's really strong, but you still have to do something with it. It's not a press this button to win the fight sort of thing. And this is definitely the route that they went in the Division 2, as you'll see later in this video. There's a lot more playmaking opportunities rather than flat stat bonuses. So I hope that, you know, Division 2 is going to focus more on player skill a little bit. And from what I can see, yeah, this definitely seems to be the case. But while we're on the topic of specializations, I also want to highlight a lesser known change, and that is the change to grenades. Now, in the Division 1, players could of course have up to 14 grenades at any given time. We have 4 frag grenades and then 2 of each exotic grenade. We have shock, fire, EMP, flash, and disorient. And they could all be accessed through the grenade wheel or through hotkeys on PC. And I would say that these grenades, they weren't really the optimal thing to have in the game. Not only was the grenade wheel a little bit clunky to use, it kind of forced you to stop moving. But 14 grenades per player, that's actually a lot of grenades. And it's part of the reason why there's so much nade spam in PvP. Which is, you know, something players have complained about a lot in the past. So what did the developers do? Did they remove the different type of grenades? No, not really, but they just tied the different type of grenades to the specializations. Depending on what specialization you're playing with, you'll have different grenade types to choose from, but you can only equip one grenade type at a time. So you really have to choose. Do you want to play with the default frag grenades? Or do you want to play with any of the special grenades that are tied to the specialization you're playing with? So far, what they've shown is that the Demolitionist has the option for incendiary nades. The Sharpshooter has the option for flash nades, and we don't really know what the special nade for the Survivalist is yet, because all the footage that they've shown off so far from the Survivalist, in all that footage he was playing with a frag nade, but that's basically how it works. You choose a specialization, and then you have the option to go with the special nade from that specialization. Either way, you will always only have a maximum of 4 grenades with you, and that's that. Now, there are a lot of pros to this. Of course, the first one is less grenade spam, because nobody really has 14 grenades, they only have 4. But the even bigger benefit to this is the fact that you will constantly have grenades of a certain type to complement your build. If you want to run with fire grenades because you have talents on your weapon that promote setting targets on fire or something like that, you're going to restock and you're going to get 4 fire grenades. Unlike Firecrest in the Division 1, which only allowed you to carry more fire grenades, but then didn't give those to you in a restock, making that stat very underwhelming, if I'm being honest. So it allows you to build your character a little more freely. Maybe the flashbang isn't as useless as it used to be in the Division 1, because maybe now you have a build where you do 30% more damage to a target that is flashed, and you get 4 flashbang grenades every time that you restock. That could be something. Just saying, that's another added benefit to that. So yeah, less nade spam, no more awkward grenade wheel, and more grenades that can be tailored to your build. Overall, very good change. It might also be worth talking about the way that they've changed the medkits or the armor plates in the Division 2, because that is actually going to have a very big effect on how we play the game. Instead of just pressing a button and healing 40% of your HP instantly, in the Division 2 you're going to be required to hold down the medkit button for 2 seconds long, and then only once those 2 seconds are over and you haven't taken damage in the meanwhile, that's also a very important detail, only then you will actually restore the armor from the armor plate that you just shoved in. And in those 2 seconds, the player, he can't move around, he cannot shoot, he cannot do anything else. So you really have to be in cover to heal up, so to speak. This is something I already talked about as well, so I won't linger on this for too long, but this basically reduces phase tanking in the game in general, both in PvE and in PvP, because it means that if you take damage and you want to heal up, you can't just run around, press medkit, press your heal, pop your station, those sort of things. You have to get into cover, you have to hold that button down for 2 seconds. Now, how things will work with healing-based skills is something that we don't really know yet. We haven't really seen any healing-based skills in the game yet, at least not in the footage. We know they exist because of the website, but we haven't seen them in action yet, so for now I won't even talk about that. But it seems like that with the change to armor plates and medkits, cover will be much more important. And consumables, they kind of follow that same path. The consumable wheel, it's gone. Consumables still seem to be in the game, but they seem to have some sort of different purpose now. You can still give consumables to civilians, it seems, after you help them out, after they help you out with a fight. As we can see in this footage, they cleared the crashed airplane and then they can give some consumables to the civilians. We don't really know what this does yet. I would guess that this increases the chance or the time that the civilians will be able to hold a place off versus NPCs before the NPCs take it back as part of the dynamic world that the developers promised. But that's still something that we don't really know much about, so I'm not going to go into that. That's speculation. But yeah, it seems that the consumable wheel itself is going to be gone. However, we could still very well see some consumables being in the game and giving buffs to the players as they do in the Division 1. This time though, it seems that they're gonna work as a replacement for the medkit. Now this is also not confirmed information yet, but it's just very likely based on what we've seen so far. But if we take a look at the inventory here, we can see that, you can swap out different grenades for the different specializations. We have a grenade slot, but right above that, we have a slot for the armor kit, which is the armor kit is what the medkit's called now, so don't worry about that. This is just a default medkit, so to speak, but there is a slot there, and it seems like the armor kit is going to be swappable for something else, something we haven't seen yet. Now this could be an advanced armor kit, it could be a different type of armor kit, maybe with a longer channel time, maybe one that gives a little armor back over time, maybe, different types of armor kits. That could all be very possible, and I think that those things are sort of the consumables we're gonna see in this game, so to speak. So instead of having canned food and water and fire bullets, we might have basic armor kit, extended armor kit, light armor kit, those type of things, and those are gonna be replacing the consumables. But that is still speculation though. I want to make that clear. All we know so far is that we have a slot with armor and that armor is going to be swappable for something else. What that is though, not clear yet. All we know is that consumables, we're not going to be running around with 18 consumables anymore, and if consumables are going to be in the game in the same way where they give buffs to the players, they're going to be tied to the specializations and they're most likely going to replace the default armor plates that we see in the gameplay so far. But yeah, moving on to something that I think no one has pointed out yet, and that's the fact that the developers have opened up the opportunity for skill builds to be more viable in PvP without being cheesy or one-trick orientated. As some of you may know, or as a lot of you may know, a lot of the skills in the Division 1, they were pretty much a click the button and forget about it type of thing. That's what frustrated a lot of people in the Division about the skills as well. But it seems that the skills in the Division 2, they've been given some extra attention to give more control to the player. The drone, for example, you can click it to activate it, but then you can click the button again for that skill to reactivate it, to change its position or change its target, and then the drone's gonna fly over to that area or attack a certain target as long as it's alive. That's a lot better than just deploy the drone and just hopefully RNG is lucky today and it actually attacks a player instead of the NPC that's 2 blocks away, which happens a lot with the turret, for example, that we have in the Division 1. That's not the only example though. We also have the Seeker Mine, which has a mod that removes the AI tracking and turns it into an explode on impact type of grenade. So if you want to play PvP with the Seeker Mine, but you don't necessarily want the tracking on it, you can just use it as an impact grenade, and that will work as well. The Cam Launcher, for example, which is a new skill, but it can almost be seen as a mini sticky bomb, has, for example, a mod which covers an area in a type of toxic substance, which then if you shoot that substance with your weapon, it will light on fire. It will set that area on fire and deal damage to everybody in the area. But instead of shooting, the projectile and then blowing it up and then waiting for the cooldown, it actually has charges, which means that you can get multiple cooldowns on top of each other. So let's say you have the cooldown, you can already use the ability, but the cooldown will then still keep counting upwards. So, if you haven't used the ability in a while, you'll be able to use it twice, 3, 4, or even up to 8 times in a row. And you can kind of make a trail of this smoke and then, light one area and then you see the whole street just light on fire, so to speak. So already to these skills, there's a lot more to them than just press the button and forget about it. There's more control to the player than, for example, the auto turret has in the Division 1. The next topic I want to talk about are the talents. The talents in the game, they've also been given more depth to promote a more active playstyle rather than equip this thing and then you have 10% more damage and then forget about it. And I'm not just talking gameplay wise, but I'm also talking about unlocking the talent. That's also become a little more dynamic, because in the Division 1 we of course had firearms, stamina and electronics, which would then unlock certain weapon talents. But main stats, they're gone. So how are we going to unlock talents? Well, some of them they're free, sort of, but most of them actually require you to have enough of a major attribute. For example, we have Pyromaniac, which increases damage to targets on fire by 15%, but then requires the player to have plus 10% weapon damage as a stat. Or we have Sadist, which increases damage done to bleeding targets, but requires the player to have 15% crit chance to be active. You also have a talent that requires a certain amount of headshot damage, or critical hit damage, or any stat really. And this is what is going to make the talent game very interesting. Why? Well, because it means that you have to build your character around your weapon talents much more precisely this time around. Especially if you keep in mind that weapon mods, as we've seen from the footage, can also reduce a lot of these stats, which pretty much means that a best in slot type of deal is not really going to be a thing in the Division 2, or at least not as overwhelming as that we had it in the Division 1, but it also means that some of your weapon talents and some of your attributes, they can be used to chain activate other talents on your build. For example, Sadist, which we just talked about, you need 15% crit chance to activate that talent. But let's say that for some reason you're min-maxing this build and you just can't get the 15% crit chance without giving up on something else that you really don't want to give up on. It's just the way that you min-maxed it, you're not going to get the 15% crit chance. So how are you going to solve this? Well, to activate this talent, you could have a second talent on your gear somewhere else. For example, another gun talent, I'm just going to use Unrelenting as an example, and this talent increases your critical hit chance by 5% per bullet hit, which is then reset if you miss a bullet. So you could use Unrelenting in a fight to get that 15% crit chance, and then the 15% crit chance is going to activate Sadist, which is then going to give you 15% more damage against bleeded targets. So even though you don't have 15% critical hit chance on your build, you can use one talent to activate the requirements for the next talent. And that's just one example, you know, we're going to have 3 talents on our weapons, we're going to have 6 talents at the very least because we have 6 gear pieces. We don't really know how gear sets are going to work, but they could also work in these kind of requirement type of ways. So it isn't so much a situation of either you have the talent or you don't, you get this talent and then you're done. It's more dynamic. You might not have the requirements out of combat, but other talents that you have on your build unlocked as a baseline can help you push the requirements for other things on your build that you might not have. And then the last thing on my list is something that I've already mentioned in previous videos as well, but it is just a general user interface. The reworked emote wheel, which is now an emote grid, is the first thing on the list. Then we have the graph on the weapon stats thingy in the inventory menu where we can see the damage drop off, where it ends and that kind of stuff. Looks really good. And also just the fact that mods are not lootable items anymore, and thus they will not clutter your inventory space as a result. Not everything is perfect. For example, I still miss seeing what skills my teammates have equipped. I'd also like to see the exact range of where the damage drop-off begins, because that's a little bit unclear on this graph. And then I've expressed my concerns about the new mod system before as well. But everything taken in mind, the UI improvements, it just looks like another big step forward. So yeah, next time that somebody says that the Division 2 looks like a reskin of the Division 1, or that it looks really similar, they're not wrong, but you can at least show them this video, because on the surface, the games may look very similar to each other, but take a deeper look and you'll find more and more and more. That's not to say that the Division 2 is going to be an instant hit though, but no matter the outcome, you can see that they're trying and really giving it their best. They are really taking all the feedback that everybody's been giving them to heart, and that is what keeps me positive for the Division 2. That is what gives me the idea that the Division 2 could very well be a very good game. That's going to be all for this video though. If you think you have something, you know, if you think you see something in there that I haven't seen yet, feel free to point it out, you know. Maybe I missed something as well. Let's talk about this a bit. And as always, I will see you guys later. Or, like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later.